New York City, sometime in the 1980s. Two men, anonymous, unassuming, unremarkable from first appearances, go about their separate lives. In terse back and forth vignettes, the two men detail the dull minutiae of their jobs, the work, and the expectations and responsibilities that define them. They talk of their perceptions of a city that leave them both dazzled and disillusioned, numbed by the daily cycles of violence and criminality that occur in the darkest shadows of the city's sleepless streets. But these men, both professionals, both trapped in the same grind of deadlines and responsibilities, have a different relationship to this backdrop of violent crime. For the young Leon Kaufman, a dreamer once attracted to the bright lights of the big city and the promise and possibilities that came with it, violence is the stuff of newspaper headlines and TV bulletins. It's there, ever present, in the background of office gossip, or in the unsolicited opinions of loudmouth patrons sharing a counter at the local diner. For Leon, it's the threat of violence that gets under his skin. The constant gossip and the news cycles pouring over the grotesque details of the crimes are like a disease, infecting his sense of awareness, his perceptions, his state of mind. Fear as background radiation. It is this absence of mind, combined with the necessity of working late, of meeting deadlines, that leads Leon Kaufman to a subway car on the Avenue of the Americas, and to his encounter with the brutal serial killer Mahogany, also known as the Butcher. Unlike Leon, whose more passive relationship to violence and his perspective as witness makes him a suitable stand-in for the reader, Mahogany is a more active participant. With his hair slicked back, his shoes shined, his suit as sharp as the knives that he carries in his leather bag, violence for Mahogany is more than an indulgence or a way of life. It's a vocation, a calling. Mahogany the Butcher, the blue-collar worker. His name suggests the chopping block, hard, functional, cleaved from the natural world. Mahogany kills not out of compulsion, but as obligation. He kills because the city requires a human hand to keep the ancient machinery of civilization oiled and well-fed. This isn't the logic of slasher fiction. It's the logic of commerce, of supply and demand. The significance of these two characters, both disillusioned by the grind, tired and worn down by the expectations of the respective roles, plays into the story's wider subtext on class and economy. Likewise, the story's setting is similarly significant to this veiled commentary on both social and class inequality. It isn't Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles where the story plays out. It's New York City. Here the seat of power is not the White House, or the Hollywood dream factories where stars line the Walk of Fame. It's Wall Street, and the imposing form of the New York Stock Exchange building, the ornate Greco-Roman grandeur of which stands in grotesque contrast to the poverty in which 36.8 million Americans currently live. Money, like the city itself, never sleeps, nor do these contrasting protagonists. Though the publication of the story coincided with the period of Reaganomics, of free market capitalism, and the era when Donald Trump left his first skid mark on the popular culture, the greed, vanity, and vulgarity of the now current president becoming aspirational qualities for the decade obsessed with the shallow surface of things is again significant. Let's not forget that Trump, then noted for his business empire, was a key influence for Patrick Bateman, a very different American psycho to that of Mahogany, but one very much analogous to Barker's story and its themes. The sociopathy of capitalism, where the city chews up and spits out its workers, reducing each of us to our most basic function as sacrifices for a ruling elite, is as much a central component of the story and our understanding of it as the more immediate cat-and-mouse relationship between killer and witness. Even the story's later expansion into the realms of cosmic horror only further cements this reading, where the ancient forces that govern mankind exist in the form of creatures feasting on the spilled blood and torn flesh of tired commuters, just trying to make it through the working week. In the presence of Mahogany, and later in Leon's confrontation with the dark forces that employ his services, the story asks, do monsters exist? Or is it the city, with its violence, noise and decay, its demands and expectations, that turns men into monsters? Is humankind driven to these extremes through some sort of cosmic conspiracy, compelled by forces greater and more powerful than our own humanity? Or is it a combination of human apathy and acquiescence that leads us as workers, as consumers, to hug the knife that stabs us? This is certainly one way of interpreting the story in question. That Leon and Mahogany are both defined as workers, conscientious and dedicated in what they do, yet at the same time just joylessly going through the motions, as the work and the city itself weigh heavily upon their respective psyches, again feels significant. In the wider context of the story, Leon and Mahogany are not adversaries. They don't function as the usual bland representations of good against evil, light against dark. Instead, they represent two sides of the same coin, two embodiments of direct labour in action. One finishes his shift, the other clocks in. As such, the Midnight Meat Train is not simply a story about a serial killer stalking the New York City subway system. It's not even a story about monsters lurking beneath the earth. It's a story about what the city and the system demands of us. It's about the sacrifices we make, and are forced to make, to ensure the continued survival of this ancient order. This system, which in Barker's story is older than the earth itself. It's the social contract transformed through cosmic conspiracy. There's a definite influence of H.P. Lovecraft here, specifically Lovecraft's 1925 short story, The Horror at Red Hook. Like the Lovecraft story, the Midnight Meat Train takes the form of an investigation. The protagonists of each story, drawn into a dark conspiracy following a spate of baffling crimes. Both stories are about subterranean worlds and ancient evils feeding on unsuspecting New Yorkers. The emphasis on marginalised blue-collar characters in each story, introducing a similar theme of class commentary. Barker and Lovecraft are both ambitious literary stylists. Their stories aren't afraid to lean into florid descriptions, capturing in fervent detail the cold, oppressive, slightly alienated feeling of their then modern-day cities. Here the hustle of characters and their estrangement from one another breeds a climate of fear and suspicion, which is felt in every word. Both writers revel in their respective depictions of squalor and urban decay, before dazzling the reader with their accounts of these underground cathedrals of cosmic carnality, where slimy putrescent forms engage in all manner of unspeakable acts on the ancient altars of unknowable civilizations. However, Barker's writing isn't merely a pastiche of Lovecraft's characteristic style. Instead, what he brings to this story, in comparison to that of Lovecraft's earlier tale, is a more intuitive connection to the traditions of horror fiction, as well as to the markedly more real-life horrors of the 20th century. In this sense, the imagery and iconography of the story feel charged with more disturbing associations, which add depth to what was already a perfectly effective horror thriller. First, we have the setting itself, the subway, subterranean, literally underground, which is rife with associations to hell and damnation. We have a descent, in the sense of the fallen angel, like Abaddon, angel of the abyss, or like the descent of Dante, guided through the 9 circles of hell, which were created by the fall of Lucifer from heaven. We might even think of the character Alice, Lewis Carroll's enduring avatar for the curiosities of childhood naivety, following the white rabbit into Wonderland and being transformed by its topsy-turvy distortions of the everyday world. This more characteristic journey into the underworld element of the story combines with the aforementioned class commentary, where the descent of characters might also refer to the idea of the lower depths, the literal social underclass, where an unseen proletariat, forced to work on sociable hours, satiate the city's economic needs. Here we might think of a film like Metropolis from 1927, where the workers literally toil underground, while the rich and privileged enjoy the spoils of their labour and the freedoms of the world above ground. As a setting, the subway is already a place of isolation, of claustrophobia, a place where strangers are compelled to meet, to wait, to share journeys that plunge us into darkened caverns from which we might never emerge. In the story, the tracks and tunnels of the subway system move through the earth like veins through the human body, pulsing, thrumming, carrying the lifeblood of the city in the form of its tired, huddled masses, the ones that have to work to survive. This itself is an appropriate metaphor for a story that is innately concerned with the body as both an instrument and as sacrifice. A story where flesh is carved, chopped, dissected, where blood flows, gushes and spills, where the heart beats fast in terror then stops dead at its final destination. Tracks like steel arteries run through the same earth where we bury our dead, reminding us what should be our eternal shame of the same tracks that led the trains to Auschwitz, Dachau, and other sites of 20th century atrocity. Midnight meat trains of a different order. Am I reading too deeply into the story's subtext here? Possibly. But is it worth noting the origins of the name Kaufmann, a German derivation meaning merchant or dealer? The name once again foregrounded the character in relation to his work. And was it not the slogan "Work sets you free" that was written above the gates of Auschwitz? An axiom that could also be applied to the killer Mahogany, who works to carry out orders for an unseen evil more ancient than the hated Nazis. Again, I think I might be pushing it a bit in terms of interpretation, but I don't think these associations are entirely accidental. The descent of the characters here into this subterranean world is literal, plausible, based in a lived reality of commuters, hustling and bustling, working for the grind. However, the metaphorical allusions of the story, and the wider iconography, do connect to these spectres of 20th century horror, which inform the more conventional genre elements and make the story an interesting one to analyse and deconstruct. Darkness is by nature oppositional to light, and here within the bones of the earth the darkness is overwhelming. As above so below, these twin cities tremble in anticipation for the fresh kill, the spilled blood, the intoxication that fear brings. The city is not ashamed of its monsters. Instead, it employs them in the service of far greater monstrosities, those cosmic beasts that reign from lunatic constellations, older than history itself, and are such a witness to our greatest horrors of human experience. Unlike the horror at Red Hook, where the realization that ancient forces exist is enough to send its characters into paroxysms of insanity, the ultimate horror of the Midnight Meat Train is not that these ancient gods exist, but that the modern world would not exist without them. That we are, effectively, worker ants, trapped in a vast, violent colony, and bred with the exact purpose of providing sustenance to these cosmic overlords. The story suggests that civilization is just a pact, renewed nightly, paid for in flesh. And somewhere within this darkened subway, any one of us, like Mahogany, like Leon Kaufman, could be told where to stand, told where the knife must fall. Is this the true horror of Barker's story? Humanity's ignorance and complicity in our own cosmic subjugation? The Midnight Meat Train is a masterful piece of short fiction from Barker. Other stories in the Books of Blood open doors into darkness, tear back veils, expose hidden pleasures and fatal costs. Such stories play on themes of the ignorance and the arrogance of men, the pursuit of the forbidden, and the dangers of the unknown. But in the Midnight Meat Train, we get these contrasting forms of horror, the physical and psychological, the cosmic and the supernatural, colliding like trains on an interconnecting track. While the ending of the story might strain credibility, I think we can read some element of ambiguity into Barker's final revelation. Could there be an implication here that Leon, like Lovecraft's fated characters before him, has been driven mad by the climate of fear that encircles him? That in his encounter with a flesh and blood serial killer, stalking his own daily commute, his already anxious mind has snapped, and with it, rationalized his own impending end as a kind of nightmarish delusion.